Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. It is a happy week here in the Charm City when we come down off the mountain with a victory, no matter how it happens. Luke Jones and I are talking all things Ravens overtime victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers in the quirky, I guess, Luke, we'll call it the next phase of the rivalry, right? No Roethlisberger, no Flacco. There'll never be a Roethlisberger and Flacco again, right? And Mason Rudolph and the hit and then overtime. In so many ways, the Ravens could have lost the football game. They found a way to win the football game.
They did, and I think that's what's important to recognize here. I mean, look, was it an overly impressive performance? No. I mean, the offense, you look at their yards per play, you look at what they did in the second half, not terribly impressive. The defense, while maybe you could look at it and say, okay, they took a step forward, I guess, but then you remind yourself, well, they were going up against Mason Rudolph and then Devlin Hodges. But we've seen crazy stuff in this rivalry before. We've seen backup quarterbacks win. We've seen weird plays. We've seen controversial officiating, which there was some of that on Sunday. But the Ravens got the job done. Did Sunday's performance drastically change my mind about this football team in the big picture for 2019? I'd be lying if I said it did, but I think if the Ravens had lost, then you really ask the question of, are they any good at all? And they figured out a way to win. This was an exhale kind of game where you get the win, you snap the two-game losing streak, you're coming home against a winless football team. The bye week is looming in a couple weeks where you're hoping some of these guys that are banged up, you're going to get back. You know, Jimmy Smith kind of at the top of the list there. We'll see what his status is over the next week or two.
Boy, he's forgotten, right? I don't know what impact he'll make or won't make, but I haven't thought about him in a month, and I'm not sitting around waiting for him to come back, and I don't hear them talking so much about it in some ways.
I don't know about that. I think they miss him, and I get questions about Jimmy Smith a lot from fans. And as of a week and a half ago, which was the last time John Harbaugh really addressed it, or I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, he hadn't begun running at that point. Now, 2 weeks is a long time, and hopefully he's at a point where he's getting close to getting back on the practice field. Grade 2 MCL sprain is about a month kind of injury, and we're at about a month since the start of the season. So does that mean he comes back for Cincinnati or maybe Seattle? That might be the more interesting one. Or do the Ravens play it safe and get him healthy for after the bye, knowing they have New England right off the bat and obviously the second half of the season? So I think they're hoping Jimmy Smith can give them a boost. I mean, with no disrespect intended to Maurice Kennedy, who I thought did a pretty nice job on Sunday overall, you're still talking about a guy who, when healthy, Jimmy Smith is an above-average cornerback. Now, the problem is he's rarely been healthy for extended periods of time in his career. But I think, especially with the loss of Tony Jefferson, knowing what he meant in terms of leadership and just filling some of that maturity void that was left behind by Weddle and Mosley and Terrell Suggs, that's a big loss there in that context, and also figuring out what they're going to do on the back end of their defense. But Jimmy Smith coming back healthy, that would be a help. That would be a boost, no question about it. But until we see him back on the practice field, it's kind of a moot point. I mean, he's going to need to, you would think, log at least a full week of practice before he gets back out there, having been out for a month. So, it's. You look at Sunday's game, and you say it wasn't pretty. It was weird. They definitely could have lost that game, and we'd be talking a very different tune had Marlon Humphrey not made the strip and forced fumble in overtime. But they got the win.
Well, I think when you're losing by field goal with 2:37 left to go in Pittsburgh, and you're going into the open end of the state, that's always rough, right? No matter any year, any roster, wherever it is, you're losing in Pittsburgh with 2 minutes left. You better have an offense. You better figure it out. You better have a kicker. You better have all of that just to force overtime, right?
Sure. So there was plenty of things that were imperfect about Sunday's game, but the outcome looks pretty good for the Ravens, and that's where you just say, hey, early in the season, clearly they have some deficiencies. Clearly they have some injuries at some key spots. We'll see what happens over the next 3 weeks or so as we move closer to the trade deadline. I would assume the Ravens are going to be active in that regard. Not that
Where's the Jalen Ramsey thing in your mind? I mean, I'm tired of reading about it, and I know it's about cap space and draft picks, and Eric likes draft picks, and he's a guy they wanted, right? So of all the guys we've ever talked about around here that was the one that got away, they would have preferred to have drafted Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, I mean, and they could have, but ultimately the asking price that Dallas wanted in a trade to move up to 4 was a little bit more than the Ravens wanted to give up. But I think it's much more on the Jacksonville end at this point. And look, I mean, first of all, it's not the Ravens' birthright to acquire him in a trade. There are lots of teams that want Jalen Ramsey if he's truly going to be made available, but everything you read is that Jacksonville, despite their Week 5 loss, wants to hold on to him. And Shad Khan, their owner, really, really likes him. And if he had his way, would probably make Ramsey the highest-paid corner in the NFL. Now, he has to want to sign on the dotted line, and I think that's the big question at this point. But I think the asking price is just extraordinarily high right now. And I was pondering this Sunday night as I was driving home from Pittsburgh that the Ravens have so many holes on their defense right now. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. I mean, it's nice to see Josh Bynes come in.
But Ray Lewis isn't coming through the door, and Ed Reed's not coming through the door, right? And Haloti Ngata's not coming through the door, and Terrell Suggs isn't coming through the door, and Eric Weddle's not coming through the door. And you know who's coming through the door? Jimmy Smith, right? And you said something like they're talking about him and stuff. I don't know what version of Jimmy Smith at 27's not coming back, right? Like, that's not coming through the door either. So whatever version of Jimmy Smith you're getting, he wasn't walking 2 weeks ago, right? So I don't know how he's going to be tackling against New England 4 weeks from now. And I know these guys are kind of superhuman in that way and whatever, but, 30-something cornerback coming back, that's not something that feels to me like you're waiting for. That feels like something you're hoping for.
Well, and I think that's fair. I mean, he was walking 2 weeks ago. He wasn't running.
Fair enough, but you know what I mean.
Right,
like, I'm talking about playing football.
Sure. But my point with that is I think you have to be really careful not to be so fixated on 2019 that you make a move or two that costs you way too much over the next few years. And what I mean by that is, let's be honest about this defense. What do they need right now? An edge rusher. They need an interior lineman who can get after the quarterback. They haven't had that. They need that. Willie Henry was supposed to be that guy, and he didn't even make the team. So it shows you they were, I don't want to say ill-prepared, because they were trying to get Gerald McCoy and a number of other guys that would have fit that description. So they need 2 pass rushers. That's not even taking into account that Matt Judon's going to be a free agent, and what are you going to do there? They need an inside linebacker. I think that much is apparent at this point, and I don't think Josh Bynes is the guy that's going to be the answer beyond, the next couple months. They certainly have to look at the cornerback position because of what you just mentioned. Jimmy Smith, final year of his deal, over on the wrong side of 30. Brandon Carr, wrong side of 30. Safety position, you would like to think they're okay there between having Earl Thomas and the younger combination of Deshaun Elliott and Chuck Clark. Chuck Clark, someone I think quietly played well for them when he's been asked to play a little bit more. Tony Jefferson's entering the final year of his deal, and if you look at the Dr. David Chow and some of the other medical experts on Twitter, and look, it's not gospel, but those guys know what they're talking about. There's concern about Tony Jefferson having a multi-ligament kind of injury that he might not be ready for the start of next year. So that makes you wonder if he's played his last game as a Raven. And I don't want to say that as disrespectful, but
he's played his last game until at least next September.
Yeah,
right? Literally.
But he's in the final year of his contract and carrying an $11.6 million cap number next year. So maybe safety. But my point is, I just named off 4 or 5 different positions. I don't know if the Ravens are in a position where it's wise to be saying, well, yeah, we'll give up 2 first-round picks for Jalen Ramsey, and have to make him the highest-paid corner in the NFL. And on the heels of that, we're going to have to maybe make Marlon Humphrey the highest paid corner in the NFL. So, I don't know. I know you don't have the Flacco contract and you have cap space, but that sounds like a whole lot to devote to one position when we just established there are a few other positions of great need. So I'm not saying Eric DeCosta should just stand pat, but I think they do need to use some discretion of not paying too much of a premium for a quick fix when I think, to me, it's looking like this team is going to be entering a period where they kind of need to rebuild their defense a little bit over the next year or so. And you hope in the meantime, Lamar Jackson and the offense continues to make strides, continues to make improvements. We've seen teams win with great offense and okay defense. I think the hope is the Ravens can make enough improvement on the defensive side of the ball, and I still don't really believe this is a bottom 5 kind of defense the way that they've shown to be over the first quarter of the season, or bottom 10, let's say. I think they can be at least the top half of the league kind of defense, middle of the pack. I think there's enough talent there, but they've got to clean up some of their issues with blown assignments, and we've talked about it. So I think my point with Jalen Ramsey, a long answer to your question about that, is no at this point based on what the Jacksonville Jaguars are asking, and I think also based on what other teams might be willing to pay, because I don't think this defense is one player away from being fixed. I think this is going to have to be a multi-layered kind of approach in improving that defense and restocking that defense. And do you really want to give up that much draft capital to for someone that you're going to have to pay immediately? That's a tough call, although not denying the talent and how important that is at the end of the day. So we'll see. I mean, there's roughly 3 weeks to go until the trade deadline, but I still see this team needing more than just one player to fix this defense. They need a lot on that side of the ball, especially with some of the injuries that they've now sustained.
He is Luke at WNST.net, and, of course, he'll be out in Owings Mills all week long. Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Big appreciation to all of our sponsors for putting us on the road here this week to Pittsburgh and back, a little up and back on Sunday at Cincinnati this week. Give a shout-out to Sid over at Charles Newsonoff & Sons. Thanks for fixing my wife's wedding ring, and he can fix your wife's wedding ring, and it certainly has all sorts of awesome stuff. We're getting up on the holidays now. Make sure you see our friends out at Charles Newsonoff & Sons. You can honk the horn right off 695 there at Paring Parkway. Also, Cole Roofing and Gordian Energy. Bill Cole's actually going to join me this week. He and I have been meeting OTR during the fall, but we're going to get on the record about the Preakness staying in Baltimore. We'll be talking more about that this week. And, of course, Baltimore Positive moves back to Fadley's this week with Bill Ferguson. Huge week out on our Baltimore Positive, though. We had John Sarbanes last week at Fadley's. Also had Ben Carden at State Fair. We're going to be talking to J.M. Shapiro. Next week, there is a Baltimore homecoming here, not to honor my birthday, but just in the aftermath of my birthday, so it'll be good times. Speaking of birthdays, we're going to be with Bradley Bozeman on Tuesday of next week, celebrating my 51st birthday at Greenmount Station. We'll be up in Carroll County at Hampstead, which means I get great crab cakes to start my 52nd year on the planet. How about that, Luke's 52nd year on the planet? It's almost like Ray Lewis's number. And, of course, our friends at Pizza John's. I went to Pizza John's with my pal Stan Jablonski from Dundalk. Unbelievable that my Dundalk pal, who moved off to Chicago 30 years ago, has never been to Pizza John's. Took him and his wife, and she's from Chicago, Illinois, and I said, you're going to get the best pizza in Baltimore, and we did Saturday at Pizza John's in Essex. They're up to me now. They're celebrating 51 years like me. Pizza John's and I were born in the same year, so when I see that established 1968, I sort of like that kind of thing. Also, Royal Farms. I gassed up in Frederick. The best part of Royal Farms, you got the app. You can just hit the app. It tells you where you go. You pull off on 270. You get your gas. You get your fried chicken. In my case, a couple bottles of water for Luke and I. And off to Pittsburgh we go. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast, gassing us up and getting us back and forth to the Bergs with Yins and Nets. Let's get back to the game, dude, because I think we're going to be talking about Jefferson all week. I think we're going to be talking about Cincinnati and how bad they are and where Pittsburgh is and the division and Cleveland playing on Monday night. But the game itself, I still go back to the fact that they won the football game against all sort of weird things that have happened in Pittsburgh. But, boy, the Ravens feel like almost the more veteran team of the two, right? Like, if we're going to evaluate the Steelers on Sunday, Boy, that's a shell of a franchise, right? Like, if they're going to go throwing Mike Tomlin over the side of the Monongahela for this, no Roethlisberger, no Brown, no weapons, not much of anything, and then his quarterback headed to the hospital after what was, a vicious hit. I mean, without it, meaning to be, I don't think it was anything dirty about it. And I opined on Twitter that when you put a guy on a stretcher, it's probably the end of your day too. It should be in the NFL. It's not, but that's just me. If I were the commissioner, that would be my rule. Especially for my quarterback leaving on a gurney. I mean, we haven't seen one of those in a while, you and I in person, have we?
Yeah, I mean, it was scary. I can't agree with your assessment because, I mean, I think it's just a reminder of what the game is.
Yeah, the game's violent, yeah.
Right. I mean, it's violent, and guys get hurt. And I think that was a perfect reminder of why we've seen helmet-to-helmet hits, and that wasn't even a flush, blatant helmet-to-helmet. That was much more a case of Earl Thomas kind of led with his arms, and then the helmet kind of came up under the jaw. And, I mean, it's just that was scary. And we've seen quarterbacks and players get concussed. We saw Joe Flacco get KO'd, so to speak, by Kiko Alonso, but normally it's a guy that's out for a second or two, right? I mean, that's typically what you see. I mean, he was out for I don't know how long, and I don't know how long he was actually unconscious, but that was incredibly scary, and I think it's just a reminder of why we've seen the NFL go to the lengths that it has, despite the frustration of people who, and myself included. I've loved the violence of the game. I played football growing up. I missed the jacked up segments on ESPN. But I think as we all go along further, and the more and more we learn about head injuries and CTE and how much is still unknown about all of that.
Well, I mean, it jacked up in 2002 is some guy we sit with at the Super Bowl in 2019 and say, "Oh my God,"
Sure. I mean, and there's a lot of that, but the violent nature of the game is what is a big part of the fabric of what made it America's #1 game to begin with. So, as much as some of it's been frustrating to see the transition in rules, and we've all seen the instances of helmet-to-helmet where a guy ducks or something like that, and frankly, I don't know what the defensive player is supposed to do. But those rules, those changes have been put in place to try to curtail as many of those instances like what we saw on Sunday with Mason Rudolphs. So I don't think Earl Thomas in the slightest was trying to do anything dirty or trying to hurt him or anything like that. In fact, I thought Earl Thomas, and I don't know him incredibly well, I've covered him for approaching half a season, he expressed some sincerity and some concern for Mason Rudolph, and did not come across as someone that was cavalier about it or heartless about it or just saying it's part of the game, move on, whatever. I think it was clear that was something that bothered him that it happened. So I think you just hope for the best, and it's a reminder, when something like that happens, or you think back to a couple years ago to Ryan Shazier, anytime a player gets carted off, it's, you kind of, I don't want to say, I think players count their blessings and they understand, hey, they signed up for that, but they all know that your football mortality can, it can come flash before your eyes very, very quickly when you're not even thinking about it. So from that standpoint, I think I kind of credit both teams for how they handled the emotional wave of that. I think whether it's one of your teammates, certainly, or even if it's someone on the other side of the ball, when you see that happen, I think that can be a sobering, unsettling kind of moment, and sometimes you wonder if teams respond, but I think both teams responded really well to that, and there wasn't any sign of, at least that I saw, of retaliation or anything like that, and that was good to see as well. I think, from that standpoint, both teams, I think, were able to, I don't want to say shake it off because that makes it sound like it wasn't important that, or significant that happened, but I think both teams got back to playing football. And
all of a sudden the Steelers are playing with their third-string quarterback. You know what I mean?
And
all of a sudden you're playing the August version of the Steelers, who still don't have Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell and all sorts of things. That's a franchise there now with a third-string quarterback. They might go 2-4. They might struggle to beat Cincinnati. I don't know because they just. I look at this and say, look, you're lucky to get out of there. You win. You feel good about beating the Steelers and whatnot. I don't know that I learned a ton about the Ravens being, a high-quality football team on Sunday because I don't think the Steelers are much ahead of where the Bengals are, much ahead of where, certainly not much ahead of the Dolphins if they're going to play a third-string quarterback the rest of the way.
Yeah, the one thing I'd say where they're ahead is I think that's a pretty good defense. And they played. They held the Ravens at 3.8 yards per play on Sunday.
Well, you showed the drive chart in the second half. You tweeted that out, and it was brutal. Yeah,
that's where if Pittsburgh's going to stay a cut or two above some of those other teams you mentioned, I think it's going to be on the defensive side of the ball. And look, let's not speculate too much about Mason Rudolph. I have no idea how long he'll be out. From what I understand, that Pittsburgh put out that he was released from the hospital after they took him there to get further evaluation, obviously, when you're talking about that kind of a KO shot that he took. So who knows in that regard, but I think your point is well taken that, and we talked about this throughout the offseason. Look, I'm not at all blaming them or finding fault with them finally saying we can't handle Antonio Brown anymore. And certainly the Le'Veon Bell thing played out the way it did, and I think he made some poor business decisions at the end of the day. But so you can say, well, you've cleared the deck of those headaches, but that's still a lot of talent walking out of your building. And what we always say about free agents that depart, or if you trade a guy away or whatever, you still have to replace that. And look, I think Juju Smith-Schuster is a heck of a receiver, but life is a little different for him now when you don't have Antonio Brown on the opposite side, when you don't have Ben Roethlisberger throwing you the football, when you don't have as consistent of a running game. Pittsburgh found a little bit of running room here and there, but certainly, they have not been a very good running team so far in 2019. So, but all that being said, your entire perception, your entire outlook changes when you lose your quarterback. Let's just be honest about this. They're in a position like the Ravens were in the second half of 2015 when it was Matt Schaub or Jimmy Clausen or Ryan Mallett playing quarterback, and you know that you're kind of just in that glorified preseason mode. And I guess that's what made it so strange for me that they were as aggressive as they were acquiring Minkah Fitzpatrick. So,
I asked all the Pittsburgh guys about that last week, and he might be the best player on their team, like literally. This time next year, they're going to be happy they have him.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I think it is fair to note for that situation, unlike the Jalen Ramsey rumors and speculation, Fitzpatrick's on a rookie deal for a couple more years after this season, so a really cheap player. I think they're thinking, even if it's not 2019, that he's going to be someone that can help them next year when Ben Roethlisberger presumably returns. He says he's going to return, and that was a move made for the next couple of years. But definitely, that was uncharacteristic of the Steelers.
To give up a draft pick, they've
never done a first-round pick, right? For in a season that looks lost. Even if
so next April we're going to sit and watch the draft, and they're not going to have a pick, and they are going to be clearly 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever they're going to be. They're not going to be a 10-win team this year.
Yeah, even if they, what's their best case scenario at this point? Being 1-4. Could they circle the wagons and be a 7-9 kind of team?
The Dolphins are going to get a top 10 pick out of Minkah Fitzpatrick. That's my prediction. It was surprising in that regard. So I'm in agreement with you. Long story short, as far as did we learn a whole lot from the Ravens, other than the fact that they showed some heart and grit and they faced adversity. We've seen John Harbaugh teams do that. That's a credit to John Harbaugh that his teams typically do that. They typically find a way, even in a game against a team that on paper is an inferior opponent and you don't play particularly well and your offense really bogs down after the first 3 drives and your defense was better but still gave up too many big plays against that offense and those quarterbacks. So, I think you take it for what it is. It was a win to kind of stop the bleeding of the last couple weeks. You maintain your hold on first place, and you move on to Cincinnati and against the dreadful Bengals team that there should be no excuse for winning at least, can we say comfortably at least?
not be in a position where you're going to overtime. It doesn't have to be 59-10 like it was against the Dolphins, but, I mean, this is a Bengals team that...
Don't make me nervous this week, right? Just don't
make
me
exactly.
nervous.
Yeah, handle it. Jump out to a nice lead in the first half and never look back. And just, hey, I mean, if it's by 17 points, that's fine. But don't make this be a 3-point game where you're having visions of Andy Dalton to Tyler Boyd on the last play like we saw 2 years ago in Baltimore. So this was an exhale game. That's what I characterized it as all week. And it took them a little bit longer than 60 minutes to get that exhale, but they were able to get it, and that's what's important in the long run. And, hey, you can be, start out 2-0. There's another team that comes to mind right away that started out really fast, and everyone was singing their praises. Well, look at the Dallas Cowboys, for example, how they've come back down to earth over the last couple games against good opponents, but it's just a reminder that 1 or 2 games does not make a full season or does not make a full profile of what a team is. So I think we've all figured out that the Ravens aren't as good as we thought they might have been after the first week or two, but I think Sunday was a reminder that the sky's not completely falling yet either after how bad they looked against Cleveland, especially in that fourth quarter last week.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. We got a busy week around here, getting up on my 51st birthday. We're going to be at Greenmount Station with Bradley Bozeman next Tuesday night on the 15th. And a reminder about Baltimore Positive. Please go up and check out all that we're doing at Baltimore Positive as well. Our friends at State Fair, I don't want to forget about them at 748 Frederick Road. My wife and I went out, had breakfast there on Saturday on the weekend. You could do the same and have brunch. Kitchen is always open to 1 a.m. at State Fair. Big thanks to Evan. Also down the street at Jennings in Catonsville. We've done a bunch of shows there. Go up to Baltimore Positive and check all that out. If you haven't seen the Sarah Heminger Thread episodes, those are Don Moeller's favorites, so I make sure I want to promote that. And Jennings also has a big Oktoberfest coming up this weekend as well. We'll be over there having some drinks, having some food. Love the lasagna over there. Love the Jennings burger. Get back over to Catonsville and enjoy all that they do. If you're up in Hartford County, Full Circle Tire and Auto, back to school, back to work. The weather's 90 one day, 50 the next day. You did a full vehicle inspection for $39.99. You get an oil change and a tire rotation. They do it all up at Full Circle Tire and Auto. They've been doing it for me for a long, long time, back to the days of the nasty van. Say hello to Dave and everybody up at Full Circle Tire and Auto. Give them a like out on Facebook. They're up on North Fountain Green Road in Bel Air. Johnny D's, where everything is homemade, the soups, the salads, the real turkey. I had a lunch about 2 weeks ago over at Johnny D's. Fell through with a client. I'm going back, though, for my birthday. I'm going to get over there and make sure I get that real shrimp salad. The catering hall is available free of charge all the time, so if you need a space, Johnny D's got one for you. Proudly serving Parkville since 1954. JohnnyD'sLounge.com. I am Nestor. We are at the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day. I did some monologuing on the way to Breezewood. It's always nice to drive down the mountain to Somerset and Breezewood and Hagerstown, Frederick on the way home. Honk the horn in Damascus after a Ravens victory over the Steelers. So good weekend, good week ahead here, and a lot of great stuff going on. You can always find me 24 hours a day on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. You can always email me, nasty at WNST.net. Don't forget the morning newspaper with blogs and good writings and Oh Say Can You See, a Camden Yards lease. All that good stuff coming your way. In the morning newspaper, it's all brought to you by Planet Fitness at PlanetFitness.com. It's always $5 down, $10 a month. Special deal going on in early October for you to get you in the best shape of your life. Stop by, see your friends at Planet Fitness. There's one in your neighborhood. I know it. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. Checking the injury report out. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colazzo is going to be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home. It is the SSV on WNST. I am Nestor. Luke's and Owings Mills. We're around all week watching baseball, talking football. They've even dropped the hockey puck. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.